BBC Radio 5 Live.
The voice of the UK.
Dotun Adebayo.
Listen live, pause,
Rewind and discover
with the BBC Sounds app.
Big game coming up at 4:30 today at Old Trafford. Manchester United against Liverpool. Gary Flintoff is there for us right now. Gary?
Connor, we are currently watching around about 200 Manchester United supporters, I would suggest, who have made their way through the barriers outside the ground and made their way actually onto the playing surface here at Old Trafford.
Game against Liverpool on Sunday was postponed after about 200 fans broke into Old Trafford to protest against the Glazer family's ownership of the club. With the reported 10,000 fans outside, Greater Manchester Police said it became clear that many of those present were not intending to exercise their right to peaceful protest and that flares were let off and bottles thrown at officers. 2 officers were injured during the protest. So what actually happened and what's underneath it all? What's behind it? Earlier, I spoke to Tyrone Marshall, who's a senior football writer at the Manchester Evening News, and Mike Parrott, who's a podcast co-host and editor of the United Muppetiers. He was at the protest yesterday. Tyrone told me what happened.
There was always a protest planned at Old Trafford today from around 2 p.m. Say around 5,000 fans probably gathered there, and then more unexpectedly, a group of fans gathered outside the team hotel in the city centre and stopped the team bus from leaving. And then the protest at Old Trafford, there was a group of probably around a couple of hundred fans who got onto the pitch and caused some issues on the pitch, which I guess causes more of an issue at the moment in a COVID era in terms of breaching red zones inside Premier League grounds and things like that. And it just kind of escalated from there. So there was issues around Old Trafford, and perhaps just as importantly, if not more importantly, at the team hotel at the Lowry Hotel in Manchester, where there was a good group of a couple of hundred fans who were blocking the road. There's only really one road in and out of the Lowry for coaches, so there was just no chance for the players to board the hotel and to board the bus rather and get to the ground.
So this was organised, completely organised. The owners would have known about this then?
The protest outside Old Trafford was organised and very well publicised. The protest at the Lowry wasn't publicised at all, but from what I've been told was organised but just kept quiet. Otherwise, of course, arrangements would have been made. I think there was probably an expectation within the club that there might be some kind of attempt to disrupt the match or to cause more disruption than merely fans gathering outside the ground and chanting. Evidently, they didn't expect this. But the large protest outside Old Trafford had been organised and very well publicised. But it was clear that there was a protest as well that was aimed at causing disruption to the match.
Yeah, Mike Parrott, how much of what was going to occur did you know about beforehand?
I obviously didn't know about all the pitch invasion and all the other things that have hit national media, obviously. So I saw by the Man United Supporters Trust, Must and the Red Army that they were obviously organising all this. It was supposed to be just before the Liverpool game at 2 p.m. and not much else, really. Just they had a similar one that wasn't covered by the supporters groups last week, where people were just chanting on the forefront of outside Old Trafford, where the statues were, just chanting and letting off flares, the smoke bomb flares, and just very match day atmosphere, really. So I didn't expect any of this to happen, but it's kind of also expected when I think there was at least 10,000 people there today, that you're always going to have a few rotten eggs, let's say, who are going to do some stupid things.
10,000? Whoa. I didn't realise that. I mean, the papers are reporting thousands, but I didn't realise it was that many. So there were, I suppose, as many fans there as would fill the away section of Old Trafford or thereabouts, in any case. Do you think, from what Tyrone was saying there, it seemed as if there were 2 protests, one sort of formal and organised, and the other one something of a breakaway protest. Is that how you see it as well, Mike?
I think so, yeah. I was following it on Twitter as well as reporting on it myself. I wasn't by the Lowry Hotel, I was just at Old Trafford. And they were saying that the Lowry one, Ash just said previously, that it was planned but not publicly planned. It was more of a secret protest to take them by surprise. obviously the repercussions of it were really bad. That the game had to be postponed. As well as quite a bit of the criminal damage they did, such as like smashing some of the windows. I saw a video on Twitter of them smashing down a door. I saw a few photos of, I think they're either policemen or stewards, like, were bleeding after being smacked with like a bottle or a can. I don't know for sure what it was. The pitch invasion wasn't great, but I think in terms of the protest, like, you're not always going to get your way with purely peaceful protests. And I know it disrupted the game, but I feel like in regards to them getting onto the pitch, it wasn't too bad. I would say what the other stuff they did on there, like, I know they threw a flare onto one of the cladding that's been on the seats due to lockdown, and I know that like caught a blaze for a bit, so that wasn't great, but a lot of the rest of it, I think, went according to plan for them.
I do want to get on to what this was all about, so just bear with me. Tyrone, from what Mike says there, you know, there were, I suppose many of the fans would have been there to protest legitimately, quote unquote. Yeah, most of the fans would have been there. But it ain't a good look when, for example, police officers or stewards are injured. I wonder, how will the Manchester Evening News lead the story tomorrow? Which photograph, for example, would you show of the protest?
I've not seen our front page, so I don't know which photos we have shown. Certainly, I know the online we've got coverage of the clashes with police, and I was there covering our blog all day, and certainly mentioned what happened with the police, and you know, like we've said, that those sort of clashes cannot be condoned. And I was there when they started, and those clashes started because a minority of fans started throwing empty beer bottles at the police, and you know, like we say, that cannot be condoned at all. It's a part of the protest that happened, and it's obviously going to be reported and should be reported. But considering how many people were there, it was a minority that started that. The vast majority of the people there protesting were peaceful. They achieved their aims in terms of making a statement and causing maximum disruption. Obviously, we don't want to see the scenes like we did, and those sort of things certainly shouldn't be happening. You know, undoubtedly, the fact that those are empty beer bottles obviously played an element in that. I think by that stage, it was around about 4:30 when that happened. You know, a lot of people had been drinking, and one thing led to another. But there is no excuse for that sort of behaviour. That sort of behaviour cannot be condoned, and those clashes, having been quite close to them, were pretty ugly and form part of the narrative of the day, undoubtedly. But I don't think that should necessarily overshadow as well the fact that the vast majority of these protesters were peaceful and went about their business peacefully.
How would you describe the atmosphere of the fans?
I would say it was. I think it was boisterous but peaceful for the most part. I was there from around 1 o'clock when there was probably just a couple of hundred there. It really sort of started getting lively from 1:30 till 2 o'clock, and from then until that trouble started, it was lively and boisterous as you'd expect of a football crowd. There was a lot of singing, a lot of chanting, a lot of banners and smoke bombs going off and things like that, but nothing that was particularly out of the ordinary. But it was certainly boisterous. It got livelier as the trouble started, but I mean, by then it had started to thin out quite a bit as well. People had started drifting home, probably some still thinking the match might have been going ahead. And I mean, once that trouble started significantly, once the bottles were thrown at police dispersed it, and the protest was over within about 5 minutes. Until then, I would have said it was, you know, the atmosphere was probably lively, boisterous, but within the boundaries of the law and pretty peaceful. Obviously, people got onto the pitch. How they got onto the pitch is something the club will have to investigate. But until then, and until that trouble, I think it was generally probably what you would expect, to be honest, from a protest by a group of football fans who feel as disenchanted as those Manchester United fans.
Yeah, I do want to talk about that atmosphere with you as well, Mike. I've been to Old Trafford when there's been a home match, And there is something of a carnival atmosphere outside with so many vendors, so many vendors and fans and so on gathering around. And I can almost imagine that at the protest. However, some fans were clearly much more than just boisterous, as Tyrone put it. Did you get a sense of the atmosphere amongst those who were really angry?
A little bit, yeah, because the mass majority, like, as we said, there were 10,000, if not maybe a little bit less there. And how many people did we see get onto the pitch and get in? About less than 100, so that's less than 1% of it. Then the rest of the 99%, they were acting. You would have seen it today if there was like obviously no lockdowns, etc. for a Man United Liverpool game. Like, you would have heard all these thousands of people chanting together, chanting about Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and about Marcus Rashford, etc. And it was really nice to be there. I loved it as well as a Man United fan that we were able to. It was the closest thing it's been to a match day since February 2020 now. So that was great in that on that behalf. But it is always just a shame that, as we were saying as well, that they will take the headlines tomorrow morning, and they already have been these. Just a few certain people out of these thousands and thousands that have just gone a bit too far, which always happens, it seems, these days when there is such a mass group going. And it is just a massive shame because, as we were just saying, it was such a good time. And I feel like they were getting their message across. I know they have got their message across as well, but it's just a shame that these very, very small amount of people have done this.
I won't allow that small amount of people to distract our entire conversation. Although when you say 100 people on the pitch, that's a lot on a pitch. You know, that's 5 times as many people as supposed to be on a pitch.
Yeah, there might have been less, to be honest. That's just me throwing a number out.
The point I was just trying to make was clearly this goes to a lot deeper than just the Glazers. I would have thought the owners, or is it just about that? What were these protests really about? You know, but fair enough, you don't like your owners, but as far as I can see, and I'm a football fan, like everybody, well, like a lot of people, at what point does being a football fan and not liking the owners then go into what we're talking about now, unfortunately? I just wonder what's really behind that. What's been bubbling up? Well, it's not just about the European Super League, this, because there were 5 other English clubs involved in that, and we haven't seen comparative scenes. So what's going on at Manchester United with Manchester United fans? How long has this unrest been seething underneath? Why is it Manchester United at Old Trafford that has seen these kind of scenes?
I think it just has been simmering for the last 15, 16 years now, since the Glazers takeover, that we've seen the numbers over and over again about how they've taken so much money out of the club, not really invested any, the insane amount of debt, etc. All these numbers that I can't really go that much into detail because I'm not a financial wizard or anything, but all these things have just kept piling on over and over again. And I assume these people who were there 15 years ago would have expected the club to have been sold by now, and it hasn't been. And obviously the Super League was the straw that broke the camel's back, it seems, is that it was just enough is enough. You've had your fair amount of warnings. This is it now. And I think a lot of the United faithful just want these new owners now. They're probably getting a bit jealous that Arsenal might be getting a new ownership soon. Obviously, we don't know how that's going at the moment, but it seems like their ownership's leaving, and they're just tired of having the Glazer family in charge, who have been here now for 16 years, and it seems to have been getting worse and worse with the lack of money put into the club, in terms of not even just in terms of on the football pitch, but the stadium is in shambles when it is probably the most famous stadium in the world, if not a top 3 one. And you look at it these days and it's a shambles in comparison to the nice new shiny stadiums at Tottenham or even City that was built, 20 years ago now? So it's just a shame that the club is slowly becoming worse and worse. And a lot of people do attribute that to the Glazers, and I do myself. So I feel like it's just constantly been simmering for the last 15 years, and then the Super League has just got everyone's attention, and enough is enough, really.
Tyrone, is this how you read it as well? Because I've heard fans talk about this is about the heart and soul of Manchester United. That suggests there is something fundamental, intrinsic about the situation that there is now, almost as if, you know, Manchester United is not the same club, or there's a fight, there's a tug of war to wrest the heart and soul to its rightful position. You would have heard that kind of thing aired as well, would you?
Yeah, definitely. And you know, that heart and soul comment has been mentioned a lot. I think that refers to the ownership and what the ownership have done to the club, the money they've taken out in dividends, the way they've run the club. And I think it refers an awful lot to that. And I think this is a case that what they did with the European Super League and what Joel Glazer achieved with the European Super League is something United fans have been trying to achieve for the last 16 years. And he managed to unite them. Unfortunately for him, he managed to unite them all against him. That anti-Glazer sentiment has been there since the takeover in 2005 and has never gone away. It's just been bubbling under the surface. There's never really been unity amongst United fans on how best to voice that. A lot of fans it's kind of been an uneasy truce, I guess, in recent years with the owners. There's been an acceptance that they're not going to sell, so how do you get them out? How do you force it? And all the European Super League has done is bring that back to the surface. And I think there is a sense now that enough is enough. And as much as it might be about trying to get the owners out, I still think there's an acceptance there that they're probably very unlikely to walk away and sell. But there are pushes now for wider sort of changes in terms of giving fans representation on boards and selling shares again at fair prices and changing the voting rights around shares and giving shares equal voting rights. And I think a lot of those things are much more achievable than a sale at the club. And the fans have seen what's happened with the European Super League has basically reignited all the anti-Glazer sentiment and the sentiment against the owners that's been bubbling under the surface, and it's come back to the surface, and that's kind of what we saw today.
For those of us who don't understand this, Mike, what is the heart and soul of Manchester United? We've seen the colours of Newton Heath, the original name of the club, displayed, the green and yellow, which was the first of the colours of the first kits from 1878. But what is it that ties, let's say, the club today to 1878? What is it that ties the fans to the spirit of 1878, if you like, or beyond that? What does it mean to you? What is the heart and soul of Manchester United?
Well, as you were saying about Newton Heath in 1878, they were a working class football club, and that value has stuck around throughout the majority of its history. Like, obviously jump forward to the 50s and 60s under Sir Matt Busby, and you saw it then, that what it was, the traditions were caring about what happened on the football pitch. They didn't care about money in regards to all of this, and they didn't before that. It's just been about making the fans enjoy having that spare time to watch a football game, and just everything going forward. Obviously, Sir Alex Ferguson was very much for, in terms of politics, like obviously very left-sided, and we've seen that with the club before the Glazers came in which they've become very, to put it a very casually way, trying to Americanize the club and make it into a business rather than being a football club. Like, the big thing, which they made a big deal out of today, is that the word football club isn't even on the badge anymore, and they want it back that way. Is that it's seen more as an LLC than a football club. Ed Woodward, the CEO, has infamously said over the years that it doesn't matter anymore what the results are on the pitch, because the amount of money we make through advertising and sponsorships and whatnot will keep United a powerhouse. And that is not Manchester United. And the Glazers like that because they know they are still going to get their dividends every year because it doesn't matter to them what happens on the pitch. They can get top four to get the Champions League revenue in, and that's it, because trophies don't really do much in terms of getting you a lot more money. You might get an extra few million, which I know obviously is a big number to us, but it's not to the Glazers when the club is worth 3-4 billion. I just find it a shame that it isn't sticking to the historic traditions of Ferguson, of Sir Matt Busby, of Newton Heath as well, is that it has always been centrally as a working class thing, a working class football club.
But football's changed.
Yeah.
But football's changed, Mike. You know that. There's, my team is not a working class club anymore. The prices of football, watching football, attending football matches are so sky high. I'm amazed that anybody who isn't wealthy can afford to go to a football match every other week to spend 50 quid or 60 quid. The best part of 100 quid, actually, when you've come out of it. And football ain't what it used to be. That's a much more existential issue for football, I would have thought. Manchester United, though, I wonder, and I'll ask both of you this, I wonder as I look at this, and I get very emotional about Manchester United. I'm from that generation that I'm not a Manchester United supporter, but my older brother is, one of your Cockney Reds there. But I was weaned on the Manchester United of Sir Matt Busby that you mentioned a couple of times, and of George Best and Bobby Charlton and Dennis Law and the European Cup in 1968 against Benfica, all of that. That is what I was weaned on. I'd have been a kid, 8 years old in those days or whatever it was. And even I knew of the trauma Manchester United had suffered in 1958. And I'm not bringing that up for any other reason but to try and explain how deep the support of Manchester United fans go. And we know, don't we, how much of a trauma Liverpool fans have suffered in more recent times. I'm not comparing them by any stretch of the imagination, but I do wonder when a team, I'll ask you first, Mike, and then I'd love you to add to this, Tyrone. When a team has suffered a historical trauma, whether that makes a transition, a sort of economic, if you like, or heart and soul transition of the club harder to swallow? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Obviously, the past disasters have been ingrained into the culture of the club. As, even the second you go to Old Trafford, you'll see the Munich Air disaster memorials, and just everything to do with the football club is intertwined with the Munich Air disaster in February '58. So I feel like selling it out to the Glazers is definitely a big problem, especially the Super League stuff again made it worse because it was becoming, no one cared about competition anymore because of the lack of qualification, promotion, relegation, etc. And I just feel like the whole Glazers ownership is just cared about money, and money, nothing to do with the fans or its culture. It really tells you something when Joel Glazer has only ever released two statements about Manchester United, which was when they first took over and then about the European Super League. Not a single thing about the Premier Leagues, the Champions Leagues, the FA Cups, the Carling Cups, Carabao, whatever you want to call them, Europa Leagues United have won in those days. And that all he's cared about is getting United more money, which is a massive shame in my eyes. And I do find it very upsetting that we have seen the Glazers and Fenway Sports Group for Liverpool have just been selling out the club, selling out both respective clubs, amazing histories as well as tragic histories, just for an extra few billion.
Tyrone?
Yeah, I think what you were saying about past tragedies, I think, certainly what happened with Munich in the Munich disaster was relevant in terms of the European Super League. In the 50s, Manchester United were pioneers of English clubs going into Europe, and players, staff and journalists lost their lives with Manchester United going into Europe, and it's a part of Manchester United's history that will never be forgotten. And for the Glazers to try and then take United out of Europe, I think showed the lack of respect they have for the club's history and what has gone before them. So I think in terms of the European Super League and the anger around that certainly added to it a sense. But I think in general as well, I mean, this was a protest at Manchester United today, and that's taken the headlines, but I think it sums up a feeling of all fans. You kind of touched on it before within football, that football has gone too far down the business road now, really, to backpedal. There was a lot of talk of a 50+1 ownership model today, but it's impossible to see how that happens in England. But there's got to be some kind of change back from clubs being entirely run by businessmen with no care given for fans. There's got to be a greater say for fans. This is a fans' game, and fans need a bigger say. And as much as the United fans want the Glazers out at the moment, if they turn around tomorrow and said we're selling for £3.5 billion, no good can come of a football club being sold for £3.5 billion. I don't think. No one is buying that club at that price as a community asset or from the goodness of their hearts. The only people buying that club at that price are businessmen who see more money to be made. And I think that is a major problem for football. And I think that's at the heart of the protest as well today, that fans need a greater say in how their clubs are run, and the balance of power needs to be tilted back towards the fans.
Yeah, it sounds like this one is going to run and run and run. That was the protest yesterday outside the Manchester United stadium, and also outside the Players' Hotel as well. And the match between Manchester United and Liverpool had to be postponed. So we heard from Tyrone Marshall there. Well, the last person we heard from was Mike Parrott, and we heard from Tyrone Marshall as well. Mike Parrott runs the United Muppetiers. He's the editor of that podcast, and Tyrone Marshall, senior football writer at the Manchester Evening News.